Hi, I'm Tom Kaler, and this is we're going to cover in the next few minutes a view of how to think about artificial intelligence in leadership. And I'm going to present four different case studies, but I'm also going to present a kind of very different kind of perspective on artificial intelligence because this is built on a question that has pretty much been part of my entire career, which is how do we build trusted intelligence? And I was been involved in AI for over 50 years. Started out on the academic side, but then ran the AI group at Texas Instruments in the very early 80s. And then in 1982, joined up with Ed Feigenbaum, who is the father of expert systems here at Stanford University, to join with he and three other Stanford University professors to develop what became the first AI company to go public, IntelliCorp, and where we worked on expert systems. What was that about? It was about building trusted intelligence around how to make decisions in medical and a variety of other areas. I then spent a few years after the AI winter working in e-commerce that was resulted in the company going public. It was a spin out from Apple. Very different experience, but then I returned to artificial intelligence, and now that began the journey that leads to where I am today, which how do we use AI to learn from people in the act of trying to solve a problem or make a decision? So it results in a very different kind of AI. It's complementary to generative AI that is very popular today, but I believe, is the form of AI that is most important in terms of working with leadership of organizations and teams, be they for profit or nonprofit, because the basic hypothesis is the greatest intelligence is not contained in the data people leave behind, which is what the current AI is trained on. But in that moment, when we are thinking together, collaborating, having brainstorming sessions, like we often do in corporate America, where we get together with offsites and things of that sort to try to figure out how to solve our hardest problems. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And one of the reasons for this is that LLMs are fantastic and they have a great deal of power, but they are not good guides for strategy. And this was most recently revealed in a HBR article, which was about large language models. If you use them for strategy, what you're going to get back are sort of the what you think you want to hear. I mean, what you believe you want to hear. And I'll let you go into the entire article. But what happens is there's so much geared up on the LLM kind of providing you general purpose information. It's not the kind of thing that would give you a differentiated strategy. And so it could be very, very helpful in the journey to that strategy. And we talk about that is not to get rid of it, but to say, hey, consider its inputs along with a variety of other sources. We call that process collective reasoning. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, learning from the data generated from our deliberative discussions. And think about this as you're in a deliberation. The AI agents may be suggesting ideas, but your team is collectively discussing them and reasoning about them. And what comes out of the other end, we call generative collective intelligence. It's the intelligence that results from the inputs from large language model from humans all together into, and it, by the way, generative collective intelligence generates an AI model, but it's an AI model generated from a different source of data. Now let's just talk about this in a series of case studies, because I think this is the easiest way to understand things is through storytelling. So let me tell a story about where we started with this. We said, what, well, an interesting place to find out what goes on in tacit knowledge, what we feel in our guts versus what we can extract from data is in the area of investing in a very early stage innovation where there is no data. and that would be like a startup. In one case, we what we did is we developed a small fund of about a little under $3 million, where what we did is complete using collective intelligence, a group of subject matter experts with experience in investment and the technology in the industry, and we basically took them through a deliberative process, looking at the business, the team, the network effects of the investor group, and the deal terms, conviction, and had them deliberate with the startup team. And here we were dealing with a startup team that had a brand new, unbelievably cool technology about being able to run deep learning models, AI models, on a chip that ran on the power of a hearing aid, 10,000x less than 10,000 times less energy consumptive than the current data centers require. And so they're very interesting. And they thought, well, we'll apply this to hearing aids. As a result of the deliberative discussion, they shifted it to every always on device and became a new category called Edge AI. And the result was that company is now, it was $6 million at the time, and we invested from our fund, as well as the evaluators got to invest in that. And it's now a category leader in Edge AI. What came out of that? It was this serendipitous interaction between the investors and the management team that gave them confidence to execute this new strategy. 90 days after the seed round of $1 million, convertible note at $6 million cap, they got a Series A investment from Intel Venture Capital, and then Microsoft came in, Amazon came in, and many others, and that launched them into a significant growth pattern. Now, second use case. So what do we learn there? That this kind of AI, this orchestrated AI, can lead us to uh, encouraging and actually facilitating serendipity. And now here's the other part about that before we go into this case study. Every bit detail of that deliberation is in an auditable model that you can review today. That happened in 2017. We can go back and look at exactly what were we thinking, who said what to whom, every detail of it. And so we can learn from that decision. This second one is now a very different problem. Business transformation. You have a private equity roll-up of 180 insurance companies, and the goal is to turn it into a unified company called the Alera Group. And so we worked with this company over a period of 3 years where we had 4,400 employees, 21 leaders, all kinds of different ideas, but we had a CEO committed to wanted to grow a culture of collaboration and genuine alignment, ground up alignment from all these diverse companies. They pulled it off. And the way they did this is they used this generative collective intelligence as ways for, before going to an offsite, learning more of what was on people's minds before they got together in person. And then after the offsite, using this technology to take those ideas forward as they were developed and emerged and one into the other. So it's a continuous learning experience, a form of collaboration assisted by AI in terms of guiding the problem-solving process. Now, the outcome is they're about worth about 1.4 billion. They're 11th in their category, and they now have completely unified those companies after about 3 years of doing this. Next use case. Um, when we got involved with this technology early on, one of our early advisors was a former chief technology officer for the Air Force, and she said this could be very, very valuable to reducing conflict, because how do we get people together and deliberate together? And she introduced us into NATO. And so we did some work with NATO around uh, improve the efficiency of command and control coordination and decision making. And they wanted to do things like tap into industry leaders and learn what they could from them. In this particular case, what I'm going to talk about right here, we actually had a 3 hour session that involved representation from 31 countries, 100 people, going through and considering 20 different key questions they wanted to consider, 3,000 ideas, but it was all done within 3 hours, and the system generated real-time reports on what they learned in each one of those. And here are some of the questions they considered. I won't read them out loud to you, but they're basically kinds of questions. And then what they were able to do is deliberate online because with 100 people, you have nearly 5,000 lines of communication to manage, and not even the world's best human facilitator could manage that process. And besides, this is done single blind. So you don't know whether it's a brigadier general or a staff member who is coming up with the best ideas. And there is an interesting story within that, is that in one of the engagements, there was an outside individual who had suggested that we consider more female leadership in decision making in the military. And that rose to the top. And in fact, NATO now has a unit where they're really looking into that. Now, where did that come from? It actually came from one of their uh, non-NATO advisors, but the NATO people picked it up uniformly as one of the top ideas. So that's an example, again, of how serendipitous discovery can lead to new pathways forward. And this is, I can't show you the detailed data here, but this curve on the right here, this shows how 3,000 ideas get resolved. What this is, this curve says the group's judgment of importance. So that what the system is able to do is adaptively learn what is the group resonating to as the most important items. This is the hardest problem in collaboration. And so here we're using AI to scale the problem of coordination. Very powerful way to use it. Very different from using AI just to learn from data. And so I hope that you just remember out of this, there's more to AI than just learning from data. GCI can learn shared priorities in real time and make them available in charts, et cetera. And it actually builds language models that you can then query. Um, Final case study that I'm going to cover today is one where what if you are a CEO or a leader and this happens to be, I think, Biogen here is a company that was seeking approval on this drug, and you wanted to use AI agents and all the data that you have, and we have a special kind of agent we can develop called a knowledge agent that only generates data from the documents you give it, only generates advice from the documents you give it. And so we created four different categories of knowledge agents, and we had them predict before we got the approval, yes or no. We had them predict whether or not the drug would get approval, and could an agent, a group of agents, well informed, provide predictive value that you could then also use with human teams to evaluate. And this experiment was run. And the accuracy was really quite good. This is using something called the Breyer score. A zero means perfect, kind of opposite from intuitive. And a one means you missed it totally. So a low score is a good score. And so what this delivered was a very high score prediction that was transparent. Now there were some details in this as well. We did a various forms of ensembles to learn what worked and what didn't. And I won't go into that detail here, but if you are going to use AI agents, do so with great care and intelligence. There are a couple of things that we have learned in orchestrating teams of agents that are very important to know at this point. It turns out that if you just do prompt engineered agents to create what is called synthetic data, they really are not cognitively diverse. You're really talking to the same source of knowledge. So any sense of diverse opinions, or when people say they can orchestrate these things, look very, very carefully at that technology. And because it's sophisticated and there's a bit of over marketing of capabilities. And I'd say the only thing to remember is that there's a ton of good there. but that some of the marketing expectations are overclaiming how much you should put trust in it. If you use it wisely, it can produce, as you can see here, very accurate results. But it means use it wisely in the sense of understanding what the technology is really doing. So here are some overall patterns, same pattern, four different contexts. The generative collective intelligence, where we're now combining learning from data with learning from what's in the minds of human beings or in AI agents, we can get far better results. And that if they're transparent, that meaning that they will explain how the new models that generative collective intelligence built on is much more like the way the brain works, where we want to remember how we thought through and reason with the problem. Well, this does it even in greater detail than we are able to do in our own brains. It remembers the detailed deliberation arguments that led to the outcome. And so it can be used to almost be an aid in what has been our thinking process, our decision-making process, how we use decision intelligence to guide our leadership decisions. And if that's one thing I want to leave with you today, and I really want to open up for discussions, is I would highly recommend that you simply not trust learning from data alone, but integrate. There's far more value in the intelligence in the minds of your employees, your team, your partners, your customers than is represented in the data they leave behind. Thank you very much. So, um, we are about freeing trapped intelligence. And diversity of perspective reduces group error. That's a very important thing that we've learned from this. And that synthesis allows us to learn or have breakthrough ideas together. And we can do this with transparency, explainability, and auditability, being able to go back and say, what exactly were we thinking when we made that decision? This, I think, is a way to use AI to strengthen your role as a leader, not to threaten it. Thank you so much.